You were born into a story that began long before your first breath. A story carved into stone, written in the movement of stars, and whispered in the temples of every ancient world. They called them the Great Ages, vast cycles of time that rise and fall like the breath of the cosmos itself. But most of what you've been told about history is a fragment, a carefully edited chapter. The truth of these ages, their meaning, their power, and the forces they awaken, was hidden, erased from the records you were taught to trust. What if the struggles you face today, the chaos of the world, the shifting of belief, the ache in your soul for something more, were not random? What if they were part of a cosmic pattern as old as time? Because every great age is more than an era. It is a map, a code, a spiritual current that shapes the destiny of humanity. And when you understand the map, you understand your place in the story. And that's when the illusion begins to crumble. Before the first cities rose from the dust, before the first kings carved their names into stone, humanity's eyes were already fixed on a canvas far greater than anything on earth. The night sky was their cathedral, its constellations their scripture, its slow turning a sacred clock whose hands were the sun, the moon, and the wandering lights we now call planets. Under the darkness, unpolluted by the glow of industry, the heavens were alive, a living text that could be read by those with the patience to look and the humility to listen. The stars did not merely glitter, they spoke. They told stories of gods and beasts, of lovers and battles, of creation and destruction. To the ancient mind, these stories were not metaphor, they were instruction. The myths of Orion, Scorpio, or the Pleiades were not entertainment. They were encrypted lessons, carrying agricultural timings, navigation routes, and warnings of coming floods or famine. The sky was the first library, and every culture had its scribes, the sky watchers, shamans, and priests, who learned to read its luminous pages. As the millennia passed, these patterns became maps, not of geography, but of time itself. The ancients noticed that the backdrop of stars shifted slowly, so slowly that it took generations to notice the change. This was the precession of the equinoxes, a celestial rhythm of roughly 26,000 years, discovered not by modern science first, but by patient observation over untold centuries. Each shift in the starry background marked the beginning of what we now call a great age, an epoch in which the world below mirrored the archetype above. The Babylonians aligned their temples with the rising of certain stars. The Egyptians watched Sirius, whose heliacal rising foretold the flooding of the Nile. The Mayans tracked the motions of Venus with an accuracy modern astronomers still admire. In every corner of the ancient world, the same truth emerged. The heavens were not random. They were ordered, and in that order was meaning. It is no coincidence that the oldest surviving human-made structures, from Göbekli Tepe to Stonehenge, are not fortresses, but observatories. They stand as stone witnesses to a time when knowing the sky was not optional. It was survival, prophecy, and divine connection all in one. Yet as centuries turned, this sacred literacy began to fade. Wars burned libraries. Conquerors executed sky priests. The map in the sky became hidden, not because it disappeared, but because its interpreters were silenced. What once was common knowledge became the guarded secret of the few. And so, the heavens still write their scripture every night. The question is not whether the map remains, it does, but whether we still remember how to read it. Because those who hold the map hold the key to understanding the past, navigating the present and shaping the future. Long before clocks and calendars, the sky itself was the master timekeeper. Civilizations who watched it closely noticed something extraordinary. The positions of the constellations at sunrise on the spring equinox were not fixed. Over centuries, the backdrop of stars shifted almost imperceptibly, moving backward through the zodiac. This slow, majestic drift is called the precession of the equinoxes, and it is the heartbeat of what the ancients called the Great Year, a cosmic cycle spanning roughly 26,000 Earth years. Imagine the Earth not as a perfectly upright spinner, but as a wobbling top. This axial wobble, caused primarily by gravitational pulls from the Moon and Sun, traces a great circle in the heavens. It is so gradual that in one human lifetime the shift is barely noticeable. About 1 degree every 72 years. Yet, over millennia, this wobble causes the equinox point to pass through each of the 12 zodiac constellations, marking vast ages in humanity's spiritual and cultural evolution. Each age lasts about 2,160 years, and to the ancients, each carried a distinct archetypal influence, shaping the rise and fall of civilizations, the values of societies, and the myths they lived by. The Age of Taurus saw the dominance of bull worship in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Aries brought warrior empires and the fire of conquest. Pisces wove an era of faith, sacrifice, and illusion. And now, Aquarius rises, with all the turbulence and transformation that heralds a new dawn. But the Great Year is more than a sequence of astrological chapters. To the sky watchers of Babylon, Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica, it was a cosmic contract between Earth and the heavens. Just as the moon influences the tides, the slow turning of the Great Year was believed to influence the tides of human consciousness. Ancient Vedic texts call these cycles the Yugas. The Maya recorded them in their long count calendar. Greek philosophers like Plato and Hipparchus described them as the grand turning of the celestial wheel. Different names, but the same truth, that humanity moves through repeating epochs, each with its own lessons and trials. In the Great Year, time is not linear but spiral. We revisit themes, but on a higher or lower arc, depending on our collective choices. An age begins in light, infused with new potential. It matures into full expression, then declines into shadow, when the gifts of the age are distorted by greed, power, and forgetfulness. Then, as the equinox drifts into the next constellation, the cycle renews, and the story changes. The tragedy, and perhaps the design, is that most people living through an age shift do not realize it until the new pattern is already underway. Only the initiates, the watchers, and those willing to read the sky can anticipate the change. And for those who can read the Great Year, the heavens are not silent. They are telling us now, we are at a threshold. The page of the cosmic book is turning, and what comes next will depend on whether we remember the map or forget it once more. Picture the sky as a vast clock face, turning not in hours or minutes, but in millennia. The 12 signs of the zodiac are its numerals, each one an archetypal chapter in humanity's story. As the slow precession of the equinoxes shifts our position through these constellations, the hand of this cosmic clock points to the dominant age, an era infused with a unique energetic signature, shaping the myths, religions, governments, and collective psyche of humanity. The ancients didn't see the zodiac merely as a fortune teller's wheel. It was a cosmic calendar, a mirror of Earth's spiritual seasons. Each sign carried not only its astrological symbolism, but also a deep mythological and elemental essence. Aries, the ram, spoke of courage, conquest, and the fire of beginnings. Taurus, the bull, embodied stability, fertility, and the worship of earth and abundance. Gemini, the twins, wove an age of duality, language, and trade, but also division. Cancer, the crab, nurtured the waters of the soul, the hearth, and the maternal lineage. Leo ruled with the authority of solar kings, golden empires, and divine right. Virgo brought order, cultivation, and the sacred feminine in service to the harvest. Libra's balance evoked justice, law, and diplomacy, but also the shadow of bureaucracy and compromise. Scorpio's sting carried transformation, death, and the secrets of power. Sagittarius, the archer, expanded horizons, urging exploration, philosophy, and the meeting of worlds. Capricorn's climb represented the building of enduring structures, but also the ossification of hierarchy. Aquarius poured forth waves of innovation, rebellion, and collective awakening. And Pisces dissolved boundaries in oceans of faith, mysticism, and sometimes illusion. As the hand of the cosmic clock moves through these signs, humanity receives both the gifts and the trials of each archetype. The age of Taurus saw the rise of agriculture-based empires, with bull cults in Crete and Egypt. Aries brought warrior deities, conquests, and the mythic heroes of Greece and Persia. Pisces unfolded with the birth of major world religions, the elevation of faith over proof, and the motif of the suffering savior. And now, the dawn of Aquarius signals upheaval, a decentralizing of power, technological revolution, and the questioning of every inherited belief. This zodiac clock was not superstition to the ancients. It was the very framework of prophecy. The Chaldeans, Egyptians, Vedic astrologers, and Maya all knew that the precessional cycle was the great metronome of human destiny. They mapped it in temples aligned to solstices, encoded it in myths of dying and resurrected gods, and used it to predict the tides of civilization. But here lies the danger. Just as the clock's face turns predictably, so too do its patterns repeat. Light emerges, matures, then fades into shadow. Civilizations rise under the virtues of an age, then crumble under its excesses. Those who hold the map of this zodiac clock can foresee these shifts, and, as history shows, some have used this foresight to guide, while others have twisted it to control. In our time, the hand is moving again. Whether we awaken to its meaning or remain blind to it will decide whether the age ahead fulfills its promise or repeats the mistakes of the past. Long before telescopes swept the sky, human beings looked up and saw a vast, silent clock turning above them. They noticed how the sun's path shifted across the year, how the moon swelled and thinned, how certain stars returned on schedule. But instead of writing these patterns into textbooks, they carved them into memory through story. Myth was the code. The constellations became characters. The solstices became battles. The cycles of Venus became goddesses of love and war. This wasn't simple poetic fancy. It was technology. An oral encryption system that could transmit complex astronomical knowledge for thousands of years without losing its precision. A child might first hear the story of Orion as a hunter chasing the seven sisters. Years later, the same child would learn that Orion's rising marked the start of the rainy season, and that the seven sisters, the Pleiades, heralded the planting cycle. The myth was the container. The sky was the key. The Egyptians told of the goddess Nut swallowing the sun each night and birthing it each morning. Beneath the surface of this tale was the observation of the solar arc, the precise timing of dawn and dusk. In Greece, the labors of Heracles mapped directly onto the zodiac. each labor corresponding to the sun's passage through a constellation. In the Andes, the Inca read dark shapes in the Milky Way rather than just the bright stars. A cosmic river whose animals marked the calendar for herding and planting. The genius of this approach is that it wove necessity into beauty. Farmers could remember planting dates not as numbers on a chart, but as the return of a hero to his homeland. Sailors could navigate by recalling the love story of two stars eternally chasing each other across the night. This poetic scaffolding made the knowledge impossible to forget, even across centuries where no one could read or write. Modern archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient cultures understood the sky, keeps uncovering these hidden codes. The alignment of temples in Egypt, the megaliths of Stonehenge, the spirals carved into rock in Chaco Canyon, all point to a world where astronomy and mythology were not separate disciplines, but two sides of the same sacred coin. The story was not entertainment, it was survival. And yet, by embedding survival in story, it also became something more, a spiritual bridge between the human mind and the cosmic order. To listen to these myths today is to stand on the threshold between science and symbolism. Each tale holds data, but also devotion. It is as if the ancient storytellers knew that raw numbers fade, but meaning endures. They wrapped their calendars in heroes, their eclipse predictions in prophecies, their star maps in the journeys of gods. And in doing so, they left us something timeless, a reminder that the cosmos is not just to be measured, but to be lived with, spoken of, and woven into the soul. Across the ancient world, there were those who lived not for the harvest, nor for the hunt, but for the horizon. These were the star priests, the shamans, and the watchers of the ages, the ones who kept vigil over the slow dance of the heavens. They were not simply astronomers in the modern sense. They were guardians of a cosmic trust, tasked with holding the memory of the sky across generations, so that no shift in the celestial order would go unnoticed. In Egypt, high in the temples of Karnak and Luxor, priests studied the heliacal rising of Sirius, the star that heralded the flooding of the Nile. They knew that to misread the sky was to imperil the kingdom. In Mesoamerica, the Maya kept codices that charted the movements of Venus with astonishing accuracy, tracking cycles that spanned centuries. Their priests were both scientists and poets, interpreting each alignment as an act of divine communication. In the stone circles of Britain, the Druids observed the solstices and equinoxes, marking the turning of the year, and over lifetimes, noting the subtler shifts of the great year itself. Among nomadic peoples, the keepers of the sky were often shamans, those who traveled not only across the steppes and deserts, but also into altered states of consciousness. In their visions, the constellations became living beings, messengers whose positions carried warnings and blessings. These shamans wove their star knowledge into ceremony, song, and sacred art, encoding the slow processional drift in ways that could be remembered even when writing was absent. The watchers of the ages were patient beyond imagination. The great year's full cycle of roughly 26,000 years meant that no single lifetime could witness its entirety. To detect its passing, these keepers compared records separated by hundreds, even thousands of years. They became living links in a chain, passing down both the technical observations and the mythic framework that gave them meaning. But they also became targets. Empires understood that whoever controlled the calendar controlled agriculture, ritual, taxation, and the very rhythm of life. Conquerors often sought to replace or eliminate the old keepers, burning their codices, defacing their temples, and erasing their law. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the burning of Maya books by Spanish priests, the suppression of indigenous star knowledge during colonization. These were not acts of ignorance, but calculated blows against the power of those who knew the sky. And yet, fragments endured. Some were hidden in monasteries, others in oral traditions carried by families and tribes who refused to let the knowledge die. Today, archaeologists, ethnographers, and archaeoastronomers are piecing together these remnants, finding that despite all the attempts to erase them, the Watchers succeeded in their ultimate task. The map in the sky still exists. The codes are still there for those who can read them. And perhaps that is the greatest triumph of the Forgotten Keepers, that the stars themselves remain beyond the reach of any empire's erasure. When the conqueror's blade cut through the walls of a city, it was not only bodies that fell, but centuries of skyborn wisdom. The first erasure did not always look like the burning of scrolls or the toppling of observatories. Sometimes it was quieter, a temple rededicated to a new god, a sacred stone realigned so its shadow no longer pointed to the solstice, a star priest silenced, his voice swallowed by the dust of exile. In those moments, the map of the heavens was not destroyed all at once. It was slowly unstitched, thread by thread, until only fragments remained in the minds of the scattered. History remembers great conquests, Babylon's gates breached, Alexandria's library consumed by fire, the Mayan codices burned under Spanish skies. But behind the political victories and shifting borders was a far more devastating theft. The astronomical records, the alignments of sacred structures, the oral teachings of the constellations, all were targets. Those who understood the ages understood power itself, for to know when an age was ending was to know when empires would weaken, when the old order would crumble, and when a new story could be written upon the earth. This is why the keepers of the map were among the first to fall. In Mesopotamia, the Chaldean astrologers had charted the precession of the equinoxes long before Western historians would name it. Yet their libraries were plundered, their stone tablets broken or buried. In the Andes, the Incas' sacred Psyche lines, those invisible paths that connected holy sites to the sun's movement, were severed when the Spanish dismantled the temples and replaced them with churches. Each destruction was a wound in the body of humanity's cosmic memory. Sometimes the erasure was deliberate, a way for the conqueror to ensure the conquered could no longer orient themselves in time. For if a people forget where they stand in the great year, they can be told any story about who they are and who rules them. Other times, the erasure came from the arrogance of progress, when colonial scholars dismissed ancient star maps as superstition, translating them poorly, if at all, and locking the originals away in private collections where no seeker could find them. Yet fragments survived, tucked into myths, hidden in temple carvings, preserved in the songs of desert nomads and the navigation chants of ocean voyagers. The knowledge could never be entirely killed, only scattered like embers. And so, while the great libraries of the sky were burned, the cosmic map was never wholly erased. It waited, in ruins, in whispers, in shadows, for those willing to piece it together again. The first erasure was not just an attack on history, it was an assault on the future. For without the map, humanity would drift, unable to read the clock that marks the rise and fall of ages. And those who erased it knew one truth above all: a people without their sky are a people who can be led anywhere. When the first erasure scattered the knowledge of the sky, it did not vanish into silence. It was gathered into new hands. But these hands were not the open palms of the old keepers. They were the clenched fists of kings, emperors, and high priests. Where the ancient star priests had used the ages to guide planting, migration, and ceremony, the rulers who took the map saw something else in it, a weapon of time itself. To hold the knowledge of the ages was to know when civilizations reached their peak, when faiths would flourish, and when they would begin to falter. This was not fortune-telling. It was pattern recognition, a science of cycles refined over millennia. The Maya tracked the long count to anticipate societal transformation. The Egyptian priesthood aligned dynastic shifts with the heliacal rising of Sirius. The Vedic astronomers tied the Yugas, vast cosmic epochs, to the moral and spiritual condition of humanity. Those who sat on thrones understood that if you could predict the rhythm of human awakening, you could either nurture it or suppress it until it served your rule. In the Roman Empire, astrology became both an indulgence and a threat. Augustus consulted the stars for imperial timing, but outlawed certain forms of divination to prevent rivals from foreseeing his downfall. In China, the mandate of heaven linked celestial signs with the legitimacy of emperors. A solar eclipse or a comet could be interpreted as a divine judgment on a ruler's reign. Thus, imperial astronomers were often bound by oath, their observations sealed as state secrets. By controlling the map, empires controlled the narrative. If an age shift loomed, if the constellation behind the rising equinox heralded new consciousness, the ruling class could reinterpret its symbols to reinforce obedience. The age of Pisces, with its fish emblem, became for the church not a time of individual mystical awakening, but a time of submission to religious authority. In this way, the collective mind was steered away from the true meaning of the shift. The map became not a tool for harmony with the cosmos, but a schedule for propaganda. Festivals aligned with solstices and equinoxes were reshaped to honor kings and conquerors. Ancient deities representing cosmic principles were rewritten as saints or demons, their stories bent to serve the politics of the moment. Even architecture was co-opted. Cathedrals built on pagan alignments, palaces on ancient ley lines, so that the ruler's seat quite literally sat at the heart of the old cosmic power grid. Those who still remembered the uncorrupted map had to speak in riddles, hide meanings in art, and pass warnings in whispered initiation rites. For in the wrong hands, the ages were not a beacon, they were a chain. The empire's greatest secret was not its armies or its gold, but the silent ticking of the zodiac clock they kept locked away, waiting for the moment to tell humanity not what the stars were saying, but what the rulers wanted them to hear. When the cosmic clock strikes midnight, the change is silent at first. No trumpet sounds across the heavens, no sudden crack in the earth. The stars above look the same to the untrained eye. But to those who watch with knowing hearts, the entire stage has shifted. The backdrop of the equinox has moved into a new house of the zodiac, and with it, the soul of humanity begins to feel an unfamiliar current beneath its feet. The ancients compared this moment to the turning of a great celestial tide. Just as the ocean's pull changes with the moon, the ages change with the slow wobble of Earth's axis, the precession, a 26,000-year dance in which the equinox moves backward through the constellations. Each sign, each age, holds a distinct frequency. When we cross the threshold from one to another, the vibration of the collective field changes in ways that ripple through politics, religion, art, science, and even the inner architecture of the human mind. At the moment of transition, the old age does not vanish. It lingers like the scent of smoke in a room long after the fire has been put out. Old structures cling to life, resisting the new energy, while the seeds of the next age quietly germinate in the hearts of those attuned to the shift. In history, these overlapping waves often look like chaos. Revolutions and counter-revolutions, breakthroughs and backlashes, golden ages followed by dark nights. The truth is, both ages are alive for a time, each pulling on the fabric of the human story in opposite directions. The shift is rarely peaceful. The age that is ending has invested centuries, sometimes millennia, in building systems that protect its worldview. These systems do not yield easily. Priestly orders that flourished in one age may be dismantled in the next. Empires rise to power on the values of their age, only to crumble when those values no longer resonate with the cosmic season. Even language changes as new symbols, myths, and metaphors emerge to fit the new sky. The ancients marked these midnights with ceremony. In Egypt, the rising of a new star at the horizon could signal the rebirth of the king's mandate. In the Vedic tradition, the turning of the Yugas brought shifts in human virtue and consciousness itself. Among the Maya, calendar endings were not doom. They were thresholds to step through with awareness, lest the old shadows follow you into the new dawn. To live through an age shift is to feel the ground of meaning dissolve under your feet. The truths you were raised on begin to sound hollow, while strange new patterns begin to emerge everywhere you look. This is why the watchers of the sky left warnings carved in stone, so that in the confusion, someone might remember that this is not the end, but a passage. And when the clock strikes midnight, those who understand will not cling to the old tide. They will turn their sails to catch the wind of the new one. Beneath the dust of centuries, stone speaks. Temples, pyramids, and sacred monuments were not placed at random, nor built only for worship or power. They were deliberate markers, aligning the human story with the great clockwork of the heavens. Across continents and ages, the builders seemed to share a secret. That time itself moved in vast celestial cycles, and that these cycles, what we now call the ages, could be mapped on earth in stone. When you stand before the Great Pyramid of Giza, you are not simply before a tomb. You are before a monument whose sides align almost perfectly with true north, whose proportions encode astronomical constants, and whose placement may have been chosen to echo the belt of Orion. The ancient Egyptians believed Orion to be linked with Osiris, the god of resurrection, and in their cosmic vision, the age they inhabited was mirrored in the stars above. Far away in the Andes, the stones of Machu Picchu sit on a mountaintop, as if resting on the spine of the world. There, temples are carved and oriented to capture the sun's light precisely on solstices and equinoxes. The Temple of the Sun, with its window framing the exact rising point of the solstice sun, is more than a marvel of engineering. It is a calendar written in light and shadow, binding the people to the rhythm of the cosmos. These alignments were not superstition. They were the way ancient civilizations kept time on a scale far beyond the human lifespan, embedding the ages in architecture so the knowledge would outlast any single generation. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztec pyramids stand as steps into the heavens, their stairs counting the days, months, and years in mathematical precision. The Pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza famously creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down its steps during the equinox. This was not just spectacle. It was the earth's shadow literally joining with the temple, as if the gods themselves were speaking through geometry and sunlight. Such design reflects a profound understanding of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the backdrop of the stars over millennia, heralding the change from one age to another. Stonehenge in England, though weathered and incomplete, still captures the midsummer sunrise through its massive stones, just as it did thousands of years ago. Its builders aligned it with lunar cycles as well, possibly tracking the 18.6-year lunar standstill, a cycle far too long for casual observation, requiring intergenerational memory and intent. This reveals something profound. The ancients saw themselves not just as inhabitants of their time, but as custodians of a cosmic schedule, responsible for marking where humanity stood within the turning of the ages. When you walk among these stones, you are walking inside a map, one drawn not on paper, but into the bones of the earth. These monuments are fixed points in a flowing river of time, each one a reminder that the sky's slow dance is the same dance guiding human destiny. They whisper to us still, watch the heavens, mark the ages, and remember that the stones were placed so you would not forget who you are, or when you are. The age of Leo rises in memory like the glare of the midday sun on a sea of gold. It was an age when the lion's roar was not just a symbol in the sky, but a living force that shaped the destiny of humankind. Roughly 10,000 to 8,000 BCE, the sun stood in the constellation of Leo at the spring equinox. This was long before recorded history, yet the stones and myths that survive whisper of civilizations crowned by solar kings, rulers who claim descent from the gods of light. Many scholars and mystics alike see in this epoch the lingering pulse of Atlantis, the legendary civilization said to have fallen beneath the waves at the close of the previous age. Plato's account, preserved in the dialogues of Critias and Timaeus, places the catastrophe in a time frame that aligns hauntingly with the onset of Leo's reign. If this was so, then the age of Leo was not merely a beginning. It was a rebirth after fire and flood. The lion, across ancient cultures, symbolized courage, sovereignty, and divine rulership. In Egypt, the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet embodied both the fury of the sun and its healing force. Her myths tell of destruction and renewal, much like the planetary upheavals said to accompany the Atlantean end. The Sphinx itself, gazing eternally eastward, may preserve a riddle of Leo's age. Geological studies by Robert Schoch and John Anthony West suggest erosion patterns on its body caused by water, not wind, hinting that its origins could stretch far earlier than dynastic Egypt, perhaps into the very epoch when Leo's stars ruled the heavens. If this is true, then the Sphinx is more than a monument. It is a message in stone, a silent witness to the age of the solar kings. Atlantean echoes resound in the megaliths left behind across the globe. In Göbekli Tepe's lion-like carvings, in South American myths of golden-haired gods who came from across the sea after a great flood, teaching agriculture and astronomy. These cultures often trace their leaders' authority not to conquest, but to a solar lineage. The belief that the ruler was the earthly vessel of the sun's will. This was an age when celestial observation and kingship were inseparable. The sky was a cosmic clock, and to rule meant to keep time with the heavens. The age of Leo's solar fire also carried a shadow. The same radiant force that sustained life could scorch it. Legends tell of hubris, of priest-kings who forgot the balance between spirit and matter, seeking only to magnify their own glory. As the lion's heart star Regulus blazed in the night, perhaps the seeds of another fall were sown. The transition into the age of Cancer would cool the flames, turning attention from solar empires to the waters of the Great Mother. But the golden memory of Leo lingered, in crowns shaped like rays, in myths of lost suns, in the unshakable intuition that once, long ago, humanity walked with kings who were more than mortal, and that somewhere beneath the sands and waves, their story still waits to be told. The Age of Cancer emerged like the moon's silver path across still waters, a cooling breath after the fierce blaze of Leo. Lasting roughly from 8000 to 6000 BCE, it was an era when the sun rose in Cancer at the spring equinox, and the rhythms of life turned toward the tides, the womb, and the sanctity of water. Where Leo had crowned solar kings, Cancer raised the priestesses of the moon. Humanity's gaze shifted from the sky's blazing heart to the quiet pull of the lunar cycle, from empire and conquest to nurture and the deep mysteries of the inner world. Archaeological traces from this period reveal a growing reverence for water as both a physical necessity and a sacred medium. Across early settlements, from the Fertile Crescent to the river valleys of Asia, shrines and temples arose near springs, lakes, and wells. These were not just places to draw water, but portals, thresholds between the seen and unseen. The moon, with its changing face, was observed meticulously, its phases tied to planting, harvesting, and fertility rites. Many cultures began marking time not only by the solar year but also by the lunar month, weaving both into their agricultural and spiritual calendars. The Age of Cancer's symbolism, the crab, speaks to the interplay of protection and retreat, of sheltering life within. In myth, this manifested as the rise of goddess-centered traditions, where creation was seen as emerging from a cosmic ocean. Ancient Mesopotamian texts speak of Tiamat, the primordial sea. Egyptian traditions honor Nut, the sky mother who birthed the sun anew each day. And in the Indus Valley, early iconography shows flowing water as the gift of the divine feminine. This watery reverence was not confined to one region. Megalithic sites across Europe show alignments not only to solar solstices, but to lunar standstills, indicating that the moon's cycles were considered equally worthy of monumental devotion. Water cults also carried the knowledge of healing, purification, and transformation. Ritual baths, sacred springs, and libations were seen as ways to cleanse the soul as much as the body. In these acts, the waters were not inert. They were alive, responsive, and aware. Priests and priestesses served as mediators between the human and aquatic realms, listening for the whispers that came in the hush after a libation was poured or a moonlit tide receded. Yet the lunar age also had its shadows. Just as the moon rules the hidden depths, so too did this era witness an intensification of secrecy in spiritual practice. Mystery schools began guarding their teachings more closely, passing them only to initiates deemed ready to hold the deeper truths. Knowledge was no longer for all, but for the few who could navigate both the tides of the world and the tides of the soul. As the Age of Cancer waned, humanity carried forward its reverence for water, the moon, and the maternal archetype. These would persist, embedded in myth and ritual long after the stars shifted. For in every vessel of sacred water, in every temple built to catch the moon's light, the memory of this age still shimmers, reminding us that life's deepest truths often come in the quiet, in the ebb, and in the flow. The Age of Gemini unfolded between roughly 6000 and 4000 BCE, a time when the sun rose in the constellation of the Twins at the spring equinox. It was an era defined by duality, the awakening of the mind's capacity for both unification and separation. Where the age of Cancer had bathed the world in lunar waters and nurtured the maternal archetype, Gemini introduced the realm of air, communication, intellect, and exchange. It was as if humanity began to speak in full sentences for the first time, not only in words but in symbols, trade routes, and the weaving of ideas across distances. In myth and star lore, Gemini's twin figures often represent complementary forces: light and dark, mortal and divine, matter and spirit. In Greek tradition, Castor and Pollux embodied this polarity, one bound to the earth, the other immortal, yet inseparable from his brother. This theme of unity in opposition echoed across cultures. The Sumerians told of Enki and Enlil, deities whose cooperation and rivalry shaped the fate of humanity. In ancient Egypt, Horus and Set reflected a similar dynamic, embodying the eternal tension between order and chaos. Archaeological evidence from this period suggests a rapid expansion of trade networks. Obsidian from Anatolia traveled hundreds of miles. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan found its way to Mesopotamia. Shells from distant coasts adorned inland settlements. These exchanges carried not only goods, but stories, techniques, and spiritual concepts. The age of Gemini was a time when cultural cross-pollination accelerated, a kind of proto-globalization driven not by conquest, but by curiosity and necessity. With this came the seeds of written communication. The earliest proto-writing systems, such as those on clay tokens in Sumer and carved symbols in Neolithic Europe, began to take shape, hinting that the human mind was on the brink of translating thought into enduring marks. Yet the twins of Gemini also mirrored humanity's growing capacity for division. With knowledge came the ability to distinguish, categorize, and separate. Where once myths and rituals were woven into a single seamless worldview, distinctions began to form between sacred and profane, tribe and outsider, truth and falsehood. This mental refinement brought both clarity and conflict. The same tools that could bridge cultures could also sharpen boundaries. The age of Gemini's airy quality favored adaptability, mobility, and the exchange of ideas, but it also stirred restlessness. Nomadic and semi-nomadic groups thrived alongside emerging settled communities, each influencing the other. Oral traditions flourished, carrying genealogies, star maps, and moral codes across generations. In these stories, the image of the twins persisted, reminding listeners that duality was not to be feared but navigated, that the human journey would always oscillate between unity and division, between the breath that joins and the breath that parts. As the equinox sun prepared to move into Taurus, humanity would take with it the age of Gemini's greatest gift, the power of communication, along with its greatest challenge, to ensure that what is spoken and shared unites more than it divides. For the twins still walk beside us, whispering in each ear, asking which voice we will follow. The age of Taurus stretched from roughly 4000 to 2000 BCE, a time when the sun rose in the constellation of the Bull at the spring equinox. It was an era of grounding, stability, and tangible creation, a shift from Gemini's airy exchange of ideas to the solid, fertile embrace of the earth. Agriculture, which had taken root in earlier ages, now blossomed into the foundation of great civilizations. The plough, the domestication of cattle, and the careful observation of the seasons turned human life from migratory rhythms into settled permanence. Villages swelled into cities, and cities into the first empires, their wealth measured not only in gold, but in the grain that fed their people and the herds that sustained them. The bull became the living emblem of strength, fertility, and divine authority. Across the Near East, Mediterranean, and Indus Valley, bull iconography flourished. In ancient Sumer, the bull of heaven appeared in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a celestial beast tied to both divine favor and cosmic wrath. In Minoan Crete, frescoes showed athletes leaping over bulls in rituals that may have symbolized a dance with the raw forces of nature. In Egypt, the Apis bull was worshipped as a sacred intermediary between humanity and the gods, a living embodiment of Ptah, the creator deity. The horns of the bull, curving toward the sky, mirrored the crescent moon, blending solar and lunar symbolism into a single sacred form. Astrologically, Taurus is ruled by Venus, a planet associated with beauty, abundance, and sensual connection to the material world. This influence was reflected in the art, architecture, and craftsmanship of the time. Megalithic monuments like Stonehenge, aligned with both solar and lunar events, rose in this age, their construction requiring an unprecedented level of social organization and collective labor. The Indus Valley civilization thrived, with advanced urban planning, standardized weights and measures, and a trade network stretching from Mesopotamia to Central Asia. The age of Taurus celebrated the physical realm, not as a distraction from the divine, but as its expression. The earth itself was the temple, and to till its soil was to participate in creation. But the solidity of Taurus also carried the risk of attachment and stagnation. Empires grew protective of their territories, rulers more possessive of their wealth. The very stability that brought abundance could harden into inflexibility, resisting change even as the cosmic clock continued to turn. Myths from this era often speak of the overthrow of bull gods or the slaying of sacred beasts, symbolic acts that presage the coming transition. In the Near East, the storm god Marduk's triumph over the primordial sea dragon Tiamat marked the rise of new orders. In Egypt, the death of the Apis bull was followed by elaborate burial rites, an acknowledgement that even the most enduring earthly power must yield. As the equinox sun prepared to enter Aries, the bull's long dominion began to wane. Yet the age of Taurus left an indelible mark. In the terraces still carved into hillsides, in the cattle carved on temple walls, and in the enduring human instinct to root, to build, and to honor the abundance of the earth. Its legacy whispers in every harvest, every crafted vessel, every stone laid upon stone in the name of something meant to last. The age of Aries, spanning roughly from 2000 BCE to the dawn of the Common Era, was an age of fire and iron, a time when the sun rose in the ram at the spring equinox and the world's pulse beat to the drum of conquest. Where Taurus had been rooted in the slow, steady building of earth empires, Aries brought the charge of movement, the heat of battle, and the rise of warrior gods. Civilizations turned their gaze from the fertile fields to the horizon, seeking not only to cultivate the land, but to expand beyond it. This was the age when power was measured in armies, and the spiritual imagination became intertwined with the sword. In myth and symbol, the ram was a creature of force, virility, and leadership. In Mesopotamia, deities like Marduk and Ashur took on increasingly martial roles, their favor sought before campaigns. In Egypt, the ram-headed Amun rose to prominence, embodying both creation and military might. The Hebrew Bible speaks of rams as sacrificial offerings, their blood sealing covenants between humanity and the divine. The story of Abraham's ram caught in the thicket, serving as a potent image of substitutionary sacrifice. Across the Mediterranean, the cult of Ares in Greece and Mars in Rome elevated the warrior as an archetype, making battle itself a form of divine service. This was also the era when metallurgy advanced rapidly. The mastery of bronze and later iron transformed not only tools but weapons, shifting the balance of power and enabling vast military campaigns. The chariot, swift, deadly and prestigious, became the symbol of elite warfare. Empires such as the Hittites, Assyrians, and early Persians carved territories that stretched across continents, their expansion fueled by both ambition and the conviction that the gods demanded it. Spiritually, the Age of Ares marked a shift toward covenantal and law-based religions, where divine favor was often portrayed as conditional upon obedience, purity, and sacrifice. Blood became the seal of sacred agreements, not only the blood of animals, but, at times, that of enemies and martyrs. The warrior priest emerged, blurring the lines between temple and battlefield. The act of sacrifice, particularly of rams and other livestock, was seen as a way to renew cosmic order, to keep the favor of gods whose wrath was as feared as their blessing was sought. Yet this fiery age also had its shadows. The same martial zeal that forged unity within could turn outward in relentless conquest. Cultures clashed, cities fell, and knowledge was lost in the smoke of burning libraries. The valor of the warrior was too often tied to domination, and blood, whether on the altar or in the field, became the currency of divine legitimacy. As the Age of Ares drew to a close, the world stood on the threshold of another transformation. The equinox sun moved toward Pisces, and with it came the promise of compassion, redemption, and the waters of baptism to wash away the blood of the old order. But the ram's legacy endures in our myths, in our martial pageantry, and in the enduring belief that courage and the will to fight can shape the destiny of nations. The Age of Pisces, spanning roughly from the dawn of the Common Era to our own recent centuries, unfolded beneath the sign of the fishes, a symbol of faith, sacrifice, and the deep waters of the unseen. As the sun rose in Pisces at the spring equinox, humanity's collective story shifted from the warrior ethos of Ares to the path of surrender, compassion, and devotion to higher ideals. This was the age when the great religions of salvation, Christianity, Islam, and the later flowering of devotional Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism spread across continents, binding vast populations together under shared creeds. The symbol of the fish became sacred in the early Christian church, a secret sign of belonging for those who risked persecution. Water, already a universal element of ritual, took on new prominence in baptism, ablution, and purification rites, reflecting Pisces' ruling element. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune, planets of expansion, mysticism, and dissolution. Under their influence, the human imagination turned toward the infinite. Mystics and saints spoke of the divine as an ocean in which the soul could dissolve. Faith became the bridge between the finite and the boundless. This was the age of pilgrimages, monasteries, and sacred texts that promised eternal life to those who surrendered the self. From the Sufi poets who sang of the beloved to the Christian contemplatives who withdrew into the desert, the theme was the same. The way forward was the way inward, and salvation lay not in the sword, but in the surrender of the heart. Yet the Piscean current carried a shadow. Alongside genuine devotion, illusions flourished. The same power that could inspire compassion could also foster dogma and blind obedience. The veil of Pisces is beautiful, but deceptive. It can hide truth as easily as it reveals it. institutions arose claiming sole authority over the sacred, and with that authority came control. Faith was used to unite, but also to divide, casting those outside the creed as heretics, infidels, or unbelievers. Wars were fought in the name of the Prince of Peace, and oceans of blood were spilled in defense of doctrines that spoke of love. This duality, compassion and control, unity and exclusion, defined much of the age of Pisces. Its stories are filled with martyrs who gave their lives for truth, but also with inquisitors who demanded conformity at the point of a blade. The sign's mutable nature allowed for both the deepest empathy and the most intricate deceptions. Even the promise of heaven could become a tool of earthly power, holding souls in a dream of salvation that deferred liberation to a future beyond the veil. Still, the gifts of Pisces are undeniable. This age softened the world's edges, reminding humanity of the need for mercy, charity, and forgiveness. It planted the seed of a truth that transcends creed, that beneath all differences, the soul longs to return to its source. As the equinox sun began to drift toward Aquarius, the veil thinned. The call was no longer only to believe, but to see, to awaken from the dream, not to reject faith, but to reclaim it as a direct, unmediated knowing of the divine, beyond the walls of doctrine and the illusions of this passing age. The age of Aquarius, whose dawn we now witness, marks a turning of the cosmic clock into an era of air, intellect, and the shared spirit of humanity. Though the equinox sun's full entry into Aquarius is a matter of debate among astronomers and astrologers, its influence is already felt in the currents of our time. This is the age of the collective mind awakening, when the walls that once divided cultures, creeds, and nations grow thin, and the awareness of a planetary identity begins to emerge. Where Pisces invited faith in the unseen, Aquarius asks for direct knowing, shared vision, and the courage to stand in truth without intermediaries. Symbolized by the water-bearer, not a figure who drinks, but one who pours, Aquarius speaks to the outpouring of knowledge, the distribution of wisdom freely to all who thirst. In myth and metaphor, this is the flood not of destruction, but of illumination. The rise of global communication networks, the near-instant transmission of ideas across oceans, and the proliferation of alternative histories and spiritual teachings are all signs of the Aquarian current at work. Information that was once locked in vaults or whispered in closed circles now flows openly, challenging the structures that have guarded it for centuries. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, the keeper of structure, and Uranus, the bringer of disruption. Together, they demand both vision and discipline, both innovation and responsibility. This dual rulership explains the paradox of our time, an age that inspires breakthroughs in science, art, and spirituality, yet also shakes the foundations of old systems until their hidden fractures are revealed. The Aquarian archetype does not tear down for the sake of chaos. It dismantles so that the new can be built upon truth rather than illusion. Spiritually, the age of Aquarius signals a shift from hierarchical religion to personal sovereignty. The guru on the mountain gives way to the inner teacher. The temple becomes the shared space of human consciousness itself. Collective meditation, global activism, open source knowledge, these are the rituals of the new era. And while technology is one of its tools, the deeper transformation is not mechanical but spiritual. The realization that consciousness is not isolated within individuals, but is a field in which we all participate. Yet, like every age, Aquarius carries its shadows. the flood of information can become an ocean of noise, and the promise of unity can be manipulated into conformity. The same tools that connect can also surveil and control. The challenge is discernment, to drink from the stream of truth without being swept away by currents designed to distract or divide. As the light of Aquarius grows stronger, the collective mind will continue to awaken, bringing both the exhilaration of new horizons and the responsibility of co-creation. For in this age, the question is not simply what the future will bring, but what we will choose to build together. The water-bearer pours without judgment. It is for us to decide whether we will drink with wisdom or let the gift flow past, unclaimed. Each great age begins with the promise of renewal, as if the heavens themselves pour fresh light into the vessel of the world. In those first centuries, humanity seems to stand closer to its origin, inspired, unified, and guided by a vision that feels both new and ancient. The myths born in these dawns speak of golden times, of harmony between the human and the divine. This is no accident. At the start of an age, the archetype that rules it is pure in expression, uncorrupted by time, carrying the essence of its cosmic imprint. It offers the gifts of its sign without yet revealing the costs. But as centuries pass, light begins to condense into form. The ideals of the age crystallize into institutions, customs, and laws. What was once a living truth becomes a structure, still luminous, but now bound by rules. In this middle phase, the age reaches its height. Its art, architecture, and spiritual systems reflect the archetype at full power. These are the centuries of expansion, the building of empires, the codification of beliefs. Humanity organizes itself around the age's ruling principle, confident that it has found the way forward. Yet every structure, no matter how radiant its origin, eventually casts a shadow. The gifts of the age, when held too tightly, begin to distort. In the age of Taurus, reverence for the earth hardened into possessiveness. In the age of Aries, courage became conquest. In the age of Pisces, compassion was sometimes wielded as control. The same energy that inspires growth can also breed imbalance when it is not continually renewed by truth. Over time, the institutions that once served as vessels for the light may begin to protect their own survival over the ideals they were meant to embody. As the shadow deepens, the archetype of the age often becomes its own caricature. Its highest virtues are inverted. What began as service turns to domination. What began as unity fractures into factions. Myths of the end times, prophecies of destruction, and calls for purification emerge in these final centuries, reflecting the soul's recognition that the cycle is nearing completion. The people feel the change in their bones, a restlessness, a sense that the old forms no longer hold life. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the light of the next age begins to seep in. It arrives quietly, through visionaries, artists, mystics, and rebels who seem out of place in their own time. These early seeds are often rejected or ignored, for they threaten the established order. But the cosmic clock does not pause. As the equinox sun shifts into its new constellation, the old structures crumble, sometimes in upheaval, sometimes in silence. The shadow of the dying age becomes the compost for the next dawn's light. This pattern of rise and fall is not a failure, but a rhythm. The purpose of each age is not to create perfection that lasts forever, but to offer a unique facet of the divine for humanity to explore, embody, and then release. The wisdom lies in seeing the shadow as the sign that the cycle is ready to turn, and in stepping into the new light with humility, knowing it too will one day fade. and that the great dance will continue. Between the end of one great age and the dawn of the next lies a liminal space, a threshold where the old order dissolves, but the new has not yet fully taken shape. These transitions are rarely gentle. They are periods of upheaval, where the structures, myths, and languages of the departing age begin to fragment. In that fragmentation, much is lost. The wisdom that once guided an entire civilization can vanish within a few generations, buried under the debris of collapsed empires and the rewriting of history by the victors of the new order. The Earth has seen this many times, yet each occurrence feels like a singular amnesia, as if the collective memory were deliberately veiled. The end of the Age of Leo and the fall of Atlantis, if the legends hold truth, left behind shards of a civilization said to have mastered both science and spirit. Survivors carried fragments of that knowledge to new lands, but what they shared became myth, stripped of its context. The transition from Cancer to Gemini saw ancient lunar calendars replaced by systems favoring trade and measurement, relegating the sacred waters to the background. When Taurus gave way to Aries, bull cults and earth-centered worship were dismantled or demonized, replaced by fire altars and warrior gods. The shift from Aries to Pisces, perhaps the most documented, witnessed the eclipse of pagan traditions beneath the rise of universalist religions. Many old texts burned, temples repurposed, and oral lineages silenced. In each case, the knowledge lost was not merely technical, but symbolic. The myths of the old age, rich with encoded astronomical and spiritual meaning, were often dismissed as superstition by the new. Sacred architecture that once aligned with the stars was abandoned or destroyed. Inscriptions weathered or were erased. The initiatory schools that preserved the deeper truths either closed their doors or went underground, their teachings surviving only in fragments that later seekers would struggle to piece together. Some of this loss was accidental, the result of war, migration, or natural disaster. But history also shows patterns of deliberate erasure. Conquering powers often sought to obliterate the memory of the old order to cement the legitimacy of the new. This was more than political strategy. It was an attempt to sever the energetic continuity between humanity and the archetype of the departing age. For if the people could no longer remember the true shape of what had come before, they could not measure the distortions of the present against the purity of its origins. And yet, not all was lost. In every transition, there were those who carried the embers forward. Hermits in remote mountains, artisans embedding symbols in their work, storytellers cloaking old truths in allegory. These hidden threads form an unbroken tapestry that spans the ages, though most of it lies beneath the surface. To trace them is to see that what appears erased is often only hidden, awaiting rediscovery when the time is right. The challenge for us standing now between Pisces and Aquarius is to listen for these echoes, to recover what was buried not just in the earth, but in the memory of the soul. For in remembering the transitions, we remember ourselves. Through the long arc of human history, whispers tell of a hidden map, not a chart of geography, but a record of time itself. It is said to mark the turning of the great ages, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the spiritual keys needed to navigate each transition. In the open world, this map does not exist, but in the shadows, fragments of it are guarded, locked away by secret societies, priesthoods, and orders that claim stewardship over humanity's most ancient knowledge. Whether carved into stone, inscribed on parchment, or encoded in symbols scattered across monuments, its pieces have been sought, stolen, and hidden for millennia. from the mystery schools of Egypt to the initiates of Eleusis, from the keepers of the Dead Sea Scrolls to the veiled archives of the Vatican, fragments of the Great Timeline are said to have survived the erasures between ages. In the East, Tibetan monasteries preserve texts that speak of cycles far older than recorded history. In the West, esoteric orders trace their lineage back to the architects of megaliths and temples aligned to the stars. These groups rarely agree on the whole picture, yet each guards its own shard of the truth as if it were a sacred trust or a dangerous weapon. The reason is simple. To know the map is to know the pattern. To see where we are in the cosmic cycle is to anticipate what is coming and to influence it. In the wrong hands, this knowledge could be twisted into control over nations, religions, and economies. History gives us glimpses of such manipulation. Kings and emperors consulting astrologers before war, explorers carrying secret charts of ancient trade routes, councils deciding which prophecies the people may hear and which must be burned. The possession of even a partial map can confer immense power, not only to predict events but to shape belief, guiding entire cultures toward or away from awakening. Yet secrecy comes at a cost. The longer the truth is hidden, the more it risks being lost entirely. Over centuries, some societies fractured under the weight of their own silence. Rival factions emerged, each claiming to be the rightful guardian of the authentic map. In some cases, the knowledge was deliberately splintered, each group holding only enough to prevent any single order from wielding full control. Wars, both visible and invisible, have been fought over these fragments. Armies clashed over holy relics, scholars disappeared with ancient manuscripts, and cryptic symbols were carved into cathedral walls as warnings or invitations to those who could read them. Today, as the age of Aquarius unfolds, the war for the map continues, though its battlegrounds are as likely to be digital as they are physical. Some believe the fragments are being released slowly, disguised as myth, fiction, or speculative history, allowing the collective mind to awaken without destabilizing the entire structure of the present age. Others insist the full truth will never be given freely, that it must be sought, earned, and proven worthy of holding. Whether the map is literal or symbolic, its guardians share one conviction: the cycles will turn, as they always have. The only question is whether humanity will enter the next age by choice or be swept into it unaware. Since the first humans looked up at the night sky, they have sensed that the stars are not silent. Patterns emerge in their slow turning. Constellations, alignments, and rare conjunctions that seem to speak in a language older than any civilization. Across cultures, this celestial script has been read as prophecy, a mirror of events on Earth and a map of what is yet to come. Ancient astronomer priests did not see astrology as mere superstition, but as the study of a cosmic clock whose hands sweep across millennia. The belief was simple and profound. The heavens do not cause events, but they reveal the rhythms in which those events must unfold. Many of these prophecies were embedded in myth. The Greeks told of the return of the Golden Age, when the constellations realigned. The Maya recorded vast cycles in the long count calendar, linking them to the rise and fall of worlds. In Vedic tradition, the Yugas, immense epochs of light and shadow, are timed by planetary configurations and stellar markers. The precession of the equinoxes, a slow 25,920-year rotation of Earth's axis, was perhaps the greatest key of all. It shifts the backdrop of constellations behind the Sun at the equinoxes, signaling the transition from one great age to another. Those who could read this cycle believed they could see far ahead, not in exact detail, but in the qualities and tests each age would bring. The present moment, poised between Pisces and Aquarius, is rich with such signs. Astrologers note the rare conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter, heralding societal restructuring, and the approach of Pluto into Aquarius, a symbol of collective transformation through upheaval. The fixed stars, too, hold their own messages. Regulus, the heart of the lion, shifted from Leo into Virgo in recent centuries, marking a turning from royal dominance toward the rise of service and the divine feminine. The ancients would have seen this as no coincidence, but as part of the prophecy of our era, that the authority of kings would give way to the sovereignty of the individual and the collective. In the esoteric traditions, prophecy is not fate carved in stone, but potential written in light. The stars announce the weather of time, but how humanity sails through it is a matter of choice. Some teachings suggest that in every age, there is a window, a narrow period when the alignment of celestial forces allows for a leap in consciousness, a collective awakening that could set the tone for centuries. Miss the window, and the lesson of the age must be learned the harder way, through crisis and collapse. Today, the sky's message is both urgent and hopeful. It tells of the breaking of old illusions, the unveiling of hidden truths, and the demand for a deeper union between the spiritual and the material. It is a call to remember that prophecy is not given so we may stand still, but so we may act in harmony with the great turning. For as the constellations move overhead, they are not only telling us what time it is in the cosmos, they are asking us what we will do with the light we have been given. Every soul is born into the influence of a specific moment in the cosmic clock. Yet the imprint we carry is not limited to the age in which we are born. Some carry echoes from far older epochs, as if threads of memory from lifetimes past remain woven into the present self. This is why you may feel a deep connection to myths, symbols, or landscapes from times long before your current life began. It is not simply nostalgia for a history you've read about. It is resonance, the soul's recognition of frequencies it has lived before. Astrologically, your natal chart can offer clues. Beyond the sun sign and planets, the placement of the fixed stars, the angles of your chart, and the alignments with ancient constellations can reveal where your soul's affinity lies. Someone with strong Taurus energy may find themselves drawn to the earth-based spirituality, agricultural rites, and art forms reminiscent of the age of Taurus. Those with prominent Aries signatures may resonate with the warrior ethos, direct action, and leadership archetypes of that age. Pisces' heavy charts may feel most at home in devotional practices, mystical surrender, and the fluid boundaries of faith, even if they live in a more rationalist time. But resonance is not only in the stars. It is in your instincts, your passions, and the patterns that repeat in your life. If you are inexplicably drawn to certain ancient cultures, if specific symbols seem to follow you, or if you carry skills or knowledge you have never formally learned, these may be signs of an imprint from a previous age. Some feel this in their art, crafting designs that echo temples they have never visited. Others feel it in their body, knowing instinctively how to move in rituals they have never been taught. The imprint of an age can also be felt in the challenges you face. A soul steeped in the age of Leo's solar grandeur may struggle with the Aquarian call for collective equality, learning to share the stage instead of leading from it. A soul formed in the age of Pisces may wrestle with the shift towards self-determination, longing for the simplicity of surrender, but being asked now to awaken in full sovereignty. These tensions are not mistakes. They are the very lessons the current age is asking you to integrate. Meditation, dream work, and intuitive journeying can help uncover these threads. Some traditions suggest sitting under the night sky and asking directly which age's current still flows most strongly within you, then allowing the imagery, emotions, or memories to surface without judgment. The answer may come not in words, but in a sense of recognition so deep that it feels like coming home. Knowing your personal resonance is not about clinging to the past, but about understanding the tools and wisdom you bring into this life. It allows you to stand at the meeting point of all ages, honoring the light you have carried through time and offering it to the unfolding story of the one you live in now. For the imprint is not a limitation. It is a gift waiting to be used in service of the age that is calling you forward. Every great age leaves behind an energetic residue, a shadow formed from the parts of its archetype that were never fully resolved. These shadows do not vanish when the cosmic clock turns. They linger, woven into the habits, institutions, and beliefs of humanity, quietly resisting the birth of the new. The shift from one age to another is never a clean break. It is a negotiation between the dying current and the one struggling to be born. And in that negotiation, the old energies often fight to maintain their hold. The age of Aries, for example, with its valorization of conquest and domination, left deep grooves in the human psyche. Even as Pisces rose, calling for compassion and surrender, the old martial spirit persisted, now cloaked in religious crusades, missionary campaigns, and holy wars. Likewise, as the age of Pisces dissolves into Aquarius, the Piscean shadow lingers in the form of hierarchical control, secrecy, and the illusion that truth can only be accessed through intermediaries. These are remnants of the old paradigm, still trying to define the terms of the new. Shadows thrive in times of uncertainty. When the familiar order begins to dissolve, fear makes the comfort of the old seem safer than the unknown of the new. This is why periods of transition often see a resurgence of the very forces the incoming age is meant to transcend. In our present moment, Aquarian ideals of decentralization, collective wisdom, and open access to knowledge encounter pushback from entrenched systems that prefer secrecy, control, and central authority. The shadow resists not because it is inherently evil, but because it is afraid of dissolution. In personal terms, these old energies live within us as much as they do in the collective. Someone deeply attuned to the Piscean current may cling to external authority, avoiding the responsibility of self-guided truth. Another shaped by the Aries imprint might find themselves drawn to conflict or dominance even when collaboration would serve better. Recognizing these patterns in ourselves is one of the most essential steps in moving into the new age with clarity. The shift is not only a global phenomenon, it is an inner initiation. Ancient traditions understood this interplay. In the Eleusinian mysteries, initiates descended into darkness before they could emerge into the light, symbolizing the confrontation with what must be released. The Vedic concept of the Yugas acknowledges that even as one epoch ends, its qualities bleed into the next, creating a time of mingled light and shadow. The shadow's presence is not a failure of the new age, but part of its birth process, a final testing ground where the old energies reveal themselves so they can be integrated or transformed. To step into the age of Aquarius fully, we cannot simply reject the shadows of Pisces or Aries before it. We must see them clearly, understand their lessons, and release their distortions while honoring the truths they once carried. For in every shadow is a fragment of light, and in every ending, the seed of the next beginning. The more consciously we meet these lingering forces, the less power they have to bind us, and the more freely we can walk into the future that is already calling our name. Some souls arrive on earth with a purpose that stretches beyond the confines of a single great age. They are the bridge beings, incarnations timed to live at the edges of epochs, carrying in their hearts the wisdom of what is ending and the seeds of what is to come. In every transition, they appear as teachers, healers, innovators, and way showers, often feeling both deeply at home in the old ways and irresistibly drawn toward the new. Their presence softens the rupture between cycles, allowing ancient truths to cross the threshold without being lost to the tide of change. Bridge beings often carry a memory that is not linear. They may dream of temples and landscapes from ages long past, or speak of concepts they have never been taught. This is not mere imagination. It is the soul's archive. Such individuals often awaken early to their calling, though they may spend years feeling out of place, sensing they belong to more than one world. In the twilight of the age of Pisces, for example, a bridge being might have been raised in its devotional traditions, yet feel compelled to dissolve hierarchy and bring spiritual sovereignty into the collective mind of Aquarius. In many traditions, these souls are recognized as carriers of lineage. In the shamanic paths of the Americas, they are the walkers between worlds, able to navigate both the material and the spirit realms. In Tibetan Buddhism, Tertons are believed to discover hidden teachings left by past masters, specifically for future generations in times of transition. In esoteric Christianity, mystics spoke of forerunners who would prepare the way for the age to come. The essence of the role is the same, to hold the torch from one shore to the next, ensuring that the flame does not go out in the crossing. Yet the work of a bridge being is not without cost. Living between ages can create a deep sense of exile, as they are never fully claimed by either. The old world may mistrust them for challenging its forms, while the new may not yet be ready to receive what they carry. Many learn to speak in symbols, stories, or art that can slip past resistance, embedding the wisdom of the old age into forms the new will understand. Their lives often follow a pattern of initiation, loss, isolation, revelation, and return. Each cycle refining their capacity to transmit without distortion. Recognizing a bridge being is less about their outer role and more about the quality of their presence. They carry a sense of timelessness, a way of speaking that feels like both remembrance and prophecy. Around them, people may feel an inexplicable stirring, as if something ancient within is being called awake. As the age of Aquarius gathers strength, bridge beings are vital. They remind us that no age exists in isolation. Each is part of a greater story. By honoring their task, we keep alive the threads of wisdom that might otherwise be cut, weaving them into the fabric of a future that remembers where it came from, even as it steps boldly into what has never been. Every civilization, no matter how advanced or enlightened it appears in its prime, eventually reaches a threshold, a test that determines whether it will carry its wisdom into the next great age or vanish into the ruins of history. This threshold is the great filter. It is not a single event, but a convergence of crises that arise at the turning of the cosmic clock. Social structures strain, ecosystems falter, and the prevailing worldview begins to fracture. The very qualities that brought a civilization to greatness are often the ones that, when held too rigidly, contribute to its downfall. In the age of Taurus, mastery of agriculture brought abundance. but also a dependence on fixed systems that resisted necessary change. In the age of Aries, centralized power and military innovation forged vast empires. Yet those same forces created rivalries and conquests that bled them dry. In the age of Pisces, the deepening of faith inspired acts of compassion and unity, but the rigid hierarchies built to preserve belief became resistant to the personal awakening Aquarius now demands. The Great Filter arrives as both a mirror and a magnifying glass, reflecting the strengths of an age while revealing the shadows it can no longer carry forward. The challenges it presents are rarely purely external. Natural disasters, resource shortages, or conflicts may trigger the shift, but the true filter is internal. The capacity of a civilization to evolve its consciousness fast enough to meet the demands of the new age. When the prevailing myths no longer align with lived reality, societies face a choice: release what no longer serves, or cling to it until it collapses under its own weight. The fall of the Bronze Age civilizations, the collapse of the classic Maya, and the disintegration of Rome each show this pattern in different guises. In our own time, the signs of the Great Filter are unmistakable. Technological acceleration has outpaced our ethical frameworks. Environmental limits press against economic systems designed for endless growth. Old political and religious structures struggle to adapt to a world where information flows freely and identities transcend borders. The Aquarian current demands transparency, collaboration, and decentralized power. Yet the Piscean shadow still clings to secrecy, hierarchy, and control. This tension creates a kind of spiritual pressure, forcing humanity to either evolve into a planetary species capable of stewarding its own future, or fragment under the weight of its contradictions. Some traditions teach that the Great Filter is not merely a test of survival, but of alignment. It asks whether a civilization can harmonize the material and the spiritual, the individual and the collective. Those that succeed emerge into the new age with renewed vitality, carrying forward the distilled wisdom of the last cycle. Those that fail are remembered in myth as lost worlds, their monuments standing silent, their stories preserved only in fragments. We stand now in the narrowing corridor of this filter. The patterns of the past are clear, and the choice is before us. The stars have shifted. The question is whether we will step through with open hands and open hearts, or be caught holding too tightly to a world already turning to dust. Throughout the myths of every culture, there are stories of luminous beings, starborn teachers, and unseen intelligences that arrive during times of great change. Whether they are described as angels, devas, bodhisattvas, or star elders, the pattern is strikingly similar. In the thresholds between great ages, humanity is not left to navigate the shift alone. There are allies above, working in ways both subtle and extraordinary, guiding the arc of transformation so that the light of the new age can take root. Ancient Egypt spoke of the Neteru, divine principles personified as gods, who maintain the balance of Ma'at during cosmic upheavals. In Tibetan Buddhism, the bodhisattvas vow to remain in the cycle of rebirth until all beings are liberated, returning again and again in moments of collective crisis. Indigenous traditions around the world tell of sky people or star ancestors, beings who came from beyond our world to teach agriculture, healing, astronomy, and spiritual lore after times of destruction. These are not just fanciful tales. They reflect a consistent human memory of assistance arriving when the stakes are highest. In esoteric thought, the allies above are often linked to specific celestial forces. The fixed stars, for example, have long been associated with guiding archetypes. Sirius as the bringer of sacred knowledge, the Pleiades as the keepers of cycles, Orion as a bridge between worlds. Some mystics believe these stellar influences are not passive, but actively participate in humanity's evolution, transmitting energetic codes through light itself. Modern science has confirmed that starlight carries complex information in its electromagnetic patterns, a poetic mirror to the ancient belief that the heavens are speaking to us. These allies rarely intervene in ways that override free will. Instead, they work through synchronicity, inspiration, and the subtle nudges that lead individuals and communities toward higher choices. A sudden insight that changes the course of a life, a dream that feels like a message, an unexpected meeting that opens a new path. All can be channels through which this guidance flows. In times of accelerated transition, such experiences often intensify, as if the veil between realms thins to allow greater exchange. But not all who claim contact with the higher forces are aligned with truth. Just as there are allies committed to humanity's awakening, there are also deceptive influences that mimic the light to maintain control. Discernment becomes essential. The true allies above encourage empowerment, clarity, and freedom, never dependency or blind obedience. Ancient mystery schools trained initiates to recognize the difference, emphasizing the inner compass as the most reliable guide. As we cross from Pisces into Aquarius, the role of these allies is not to save us, but to walk beside us as we claim our own sovereignty. They hold the memory of what humanity can become and reflect it back to us until we can see it clearly for ourselves. In every prayer whispered to the stars, in every moment of quiet where a deeper voice is heard, their presence is there, patient, unwavering, and committed to the great unfolding of this new dawn. The fragments of humanity's true timeline lie scattered like broken tablets across the ages, pieces of stone worn by centuries, myths recited in half-forgotten tongues, star maps misinterpreted or deliberately altered. To restore the map is to attempt the impossible, to weave together what remains after millennia of erasure, distortion, and secrecy. Yet across the world, this work is already underway. Historians, archaeologists, linguists, and mystics each hold parts of the puzzle, often unaware that they are contributing to a far greater picture. The restoration is not only about reconstructing history, it is about remembering the cycles so we can see where we are now and what lies ahead. The destruction of the original map was no accident. Each shift between great ages has seen the deliberate suppression of the knowledge that would allow humanity to track its own cosmic journey. Empires rewrote the records, priesthoods hid scrolls in vaults, and libraries that held the keys, from Alexandria to Nalanda, were reduced to ash. The victors of each age understood that whoever controls the timeline controls the narrative, and whoever controls the narrative shapes the destiny of the people. By severing the link to our true past, they ensured that each generation would see itself as the pinnacle of history rather than a single chapter in an ancient and ongoing story. Yet pieces survived. In the alignments of megalithic structures like Stonehenge, Nabta Playa, and the Giza Plateau, we see the fingerprints of a deep astronomical knowledge that predates the written word. In the oral traditions of the Hopi, the Dogon, and the Mari, star cycles and cataclysmic transitions are encoded in story. In surviving sacred texts, the Vedas, the Popol Vuh, the Hermetica, we find veiled references to precessional cycles and lost ages. When placed side by side, these fragments begin to speak again, their voices forming a chorus across continents and millennia. The work of restoring the map requires more than academic study. It demands intuition, pattern recognition, and the humility to accept that not all truths will fit neatly into the frameworks we have inherited. It is a process of synthesis, where ancient myths are read alongside modern astronomy, and sacred geometry is understood as both spiritual symbol and precise mathematical code. Each recovered detail, a temple's orientation to a solstice sunrise, a myth that mirrors another from across the ocean, a set of petroglyphs matching the layout of a constellation, is like a shard of colored glass in a vast mosaic. Alone, it is beautiful but incomplete. Together, they begin to reveal the whole image. And as the image forms, something extraordinary happens. We start to see not just where we have been, but the repeating pattern of rise and fall, light and shadow that shapes each age. The restored map becomes both history and prophecy, a tool for navigating the turning now upon us. Those who hold it will not be caught unprepared when the tide of the new age surges. For the timeline they tried to destroy was never truly lost. It was waiting, hidden in the stones, the stars, and the stories, until the moment humanity was ready to remember. That moment is now. To live by the map of the great ages is to step out of the illusion that life is a series of disconnected events and see it instead as part of a vast and ongoing pattern. The map is not just a record of history. It is a compass, a lens through which you can read the energy of your own time and understand the larger forces shaping your path. Each age has its own current, its own set of archetypes, strengths, and pitfalls. When you know which current you are swimming in, and which ones flow within you from lifetimes past, you can make choices in alignment with the greater rhythm rather than fighting against it. Begin by locating yourself in both the collective and the personal timeline. Collectively, we are moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, shifting from hierarchies, devotion, and the veil of mystery into an era of transparency, shared knowledge, and collective awakening. Personally, you may carry an imprint from a previous age, the grounded stability of Taurus, the warrior fire of Aries, or the mystical depth of Pisces. And these patterns can influence how you respond to the challenges and opportunities of the present. Understanding this is like knowing both the wind and the tide before you set sail. The map also teaches that each age moves from light to shadow over time, and that transitions between ages are periods of turbulence. Knowing this can help you see global events with greater clarity. Economic instability, cultural shifts, and spiritual unrest are not random. They are symptoms of the old age releasing its grip and the new one finding its form. Instead of feeling caught in chaos, you can learn to read these signs as markers along the path, reminders of where we are in the great turning. On a personal level, living by the map invites you to align your life choices with the qualities the new age is trying to cultivate. In Aquarius, that means valuing collaboration over competition, truth over secrecy, and innovation over blind tradition. It may mean questioning inherited beliefs, seeking out communities that share your vision, and using your skills in ways that contribute to collective growth. It also means recognizing the shadow of the current age, the flood of information that confuses as much as it enlightens, and practicing discernment in what you choose to absorb and share. The map is not a rigid set of instructions. It is an orientation tool. It will not tell you exactly what to do, but it will help you see which direction the river is flowing so you can decide whether to move with it or against it. The wisdom of the ages is not meant to dictate your destiny, but to give you the awareness needed to steer with intention. When you live by the map, your personal journey becomes part of something much larger, the story of humanity's unfolding. And in that awareness, each step you take carries both the memory of where we have been and the vision of where we are going. Beyond the age of Aquarius lies a horizon so distant that it feels like the edge of imagination. Yet the cycles of the great ages allow us to catch glimpses of what may come. After roughly 2,160 years under Aquarius, the equinox sun will shift again, moving into the constellation of Capricorn. This will mark a profound change in the collective current, just as every transition before it has reshaped the destiny of humanity. If Aquarius is the age of the collective mind awakening, Capricorn will be the age of mastery, an era defined by structure, discipline, and the long-term stewardship of what Aquarius began. In the symbolism of the zodiac, Capricorn is the sea goat, a creature with the sure-footed strength to climb the highest mountains and the tail of a fish that remembers the deep waters of the soul. It is a sign ruled by Saturn, the keeper of time, associated with endurance, responsibility, and the building of legacies meant to last for centuries. While Aquarius seeks to liberate and innovate, Capricorn seeks to refine and anchor. In the far future, this could manifest as a civilization that has transcended the instability of rapid change and learned how to sustain balance between material progress and spiritual wisdom. Esoteric traditions often describe post-Aquarian ages as times when humanity will begin to operate fully as a planetary and even interplanetary species. The technologies born in Aquarius, from advanced energy systems to new forms of governance, will be matured under Capricorn's steady hand. The global collaboration seeded in our current age could evolve into a unified planetary council, where decisions are made with the foresight of centuries rather than the short-term urgency of political cycles. If Aquarius is the outpouring of the vessel, Capricorn is the careful shaping of the cup that will hold what has been poured. But as with all ages, the far future will hold its own challenges. The Capricorn shadow can manifest as rigid hierarchy, excessive control, and the prioritization of order over freedom. Without vigilance, the discipline that sustains could become the structure that imprisons. The collective will be faced with the question of how to maintain stability without suffocating the very creativity and diversity that gave rise to it. This is a lesson every age must face in its own way. The balance between the gifts of its archetype and the shadows that emerge when those gifts are overextended. While we cannot know the full reality of life beyond Aquarius, the seeds of it are already being planted. The choices we make now, in how we handle knowledge, resources, and each other, will shape the inheritance of those who walk in that distant time. The far future is not an abstract dream. It is being written in the present moment. And though we may never stand beneath the skies of the age of Capricorn, our actions can echo forward, becoming part of the foundation upon which that world will rise. In the great turning of the ages, every choice is a gift to the future. Above our heads, the night sky appears eternal, a field of fixed stars and predictable motions. But in the realm of human affairs, the sky has always been contested ground. Throughout history, those who interpret the heavens have often held power over those who do not. In the ancient world, it was the astronomer priests, the royal astrologers, the keepers of calendars and celestial omens, who advised kings and determined when to plant, when to sail, when to wage war. To read the sky was to read the clock of destiny. And now, as we stand at the threshold between Pisces and Aquarius, the question of who decides humanity's direction is more pressing than ever. In our era, the interpreters of the sky take many forms. They are scientists mapping the cosmos with telescopes and satellites, discovering exoplanets and tracing the movement of galaxies. They are astrologers charting the alignments of planets and stars to understand the energetic tides shaping our collective moment. They are political strategists and corporate visionaries using vast data networks, our modern constellations of information, to forecast trends and steer public perception. In a sense, the battle for the sky is no longer only about stars. It is about who controls the story of the future. Competing visions of humanity's direction clash in this space. Some groups, echoing the shadows of past ages, seek to centralize control, using knowledge of cycles and technology to consolidate power in the hands of the few. Others, aligned with the Aquarian ideal, push for transparency, decentralization, and the sharing of knowledge so that the collective itself becomes the navigator. The tension between these forces is the heartbeat of our transition. And as in every age shift before, the outcome will depend on whether the knowledge of the sky is used to liberate or to bind. Ancient patterns warn us of both possibilities. When the priesthood of Babylon guarded the star charts, navigation and prophecy were tools of the elite, and the people were kept in dependence. But in other cultures, such as Polynesian navigators who taught the way of the stars openly to apprentices, the knowledge ensured survival for entire communities. Today, this same choice plays out on a global stage. The maps of our time are not only star charts, but climate models, economic forecasts, and technological roadmaps. Who holds and interprets these tools wields immense influence over the course we take. The battle for the sky is not fought only in observatories or boardrooms. It is waged in the human mind. Every person who learns to read the patterns, whether in astronomy, astrology, history, or the quiet wisdom of nature, becomes harder to steer through manipulation. Aquarius demands such participation. It calls for a world in which the stars are not the property of the powerful, but the inheritance of all. In this moment, the sky is still open. The stories written there can still be reclaimed by the collective. But if we turn away, if we leave the interpretation to those who would use it for their own ends, we risk repeating the cycles of domination that have shadowed past ages. The heavens are speaking. The question is, who will answer, and whose voice will carry the story forward? From the moment you took your first breath, you were woven into the fabric of the cosmic clock. The position of the planets, the tilt of the Earth, the backdrop of the stars. All of it formed a unique chord of resonance that became your signature in this life. It is easy to think of the great ages as something vast and impersonal, a sweep of time too large for one human life to matter. But the truth is, the same forces that move civilizations also move within you. The great turning is not happening outside of you. You are one of its hands. The final alignment is not a single moment in history, but the point of recognition when the individual and the collective understand their unity within the cycle. As the sun moves from Pisces into Aquarius, the heavens are not simply changing signs. They are mirroring the inner transformation of billions of souls. The cosmic clock does not measure time in hours and minutes. It measures it in consciousness, in the rising and falling of awareness across generations. You are alive now not by chance, but because your soul chose to be part of this turning, to contribute to what is unfolding. In ancient temples aligned with solstices and equinoxes, initiates would gather to witness the first light of a new season touch the sacred stone. It was more than ceremony. It was a reminder that their lives were synchronized with the sky. That same truth holds today. Every choice you make, every truth you speak, every illusion you shed is a movement in harmony or disharmony with the age that is being born. You are not just an observer of the cycle. You are one of its gears, shaping how smoothly or how violently it turns. The final alignment also speaks to the integration of past and future. The wisdom carried from earlier ages, the shadows we have faced, the seeds planted now. All of these must come into balance for the transition to be whole. If the old is rejected without understanding, its lessons are lost. If the new is resisted out of fear, its promise is delayed. Your role, like that of the collective, is to stand in the center of the wheel, holding the tension between what was and what will be until they become one. This is why the Aquarian current calls so strongly for awareness, for participation, for the dismantling of passivity. It is not enough to know that the cycle is turning. You are invited to move with it consciously. The myths say the cosmic clock has many faces. Some see it as a wheel, others as a spiral. Either way, you are not on the outside looking in. You are turning with it, step by step, breath by breath. One day, far in the future, the record of this transition will be another chapter in the long map of the ages. And when it is read, your light, the part you played, the truth you carried, will be part of its story. For the cosmic clock does not forget. Every moment, every life is one of its hands. And right now, it is pointing to you. And now, if the turning of this great cosmic clock has stirred something in you, if the ages have spoken in a way you can feel in your bones, don't let this be where the journey ends. There are more paths to walk, more hidden chapters to uncover, and each one is waiting for you. Watch our other videos, follow the threads we've been weaving here, and see how they connect to the story of your own soul. If what you've heard tonight has awakened a spark, subscribe to join us as we explore the truths they tried to erase. Leave a comment, share what resonated. Add your voice to the conversation, because in the age of Aquarius, every voice matters. And share this with someone who needs to remember, someone who might be standing right now at the edge of their own awakening. Like this video so it reaches more seekers, so that together we can keep this light alive. The journey is not over. In truth, it's only beginning. Welcome to the hidden voyage. Welcome home, soul whisper and soul creator. The hidden voyage.